What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So it looks like we're on the precipice of World War III based on the formula of entangling alliances. And the source of this conflict is not going to be in Europe like wars past, but it's looking to come from the MENA area, that Middle East, North Africa area. And at the core of that is going to be a conflict between Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. So we just covered a video a few days ago where I talked about this Islamic NATO that was coming to fruition between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. And in that agreement, it was going to be a security collective agreement. It was going to be basically NATO. A strike on one is a strike on all. And this is three volatile countries. They're heavily in a mix of geopolitics. So it's a killer box. Like this is a box of dynamite that can go off. Now, that alone was very interesting. This was very three unique and powerful countries in their own right. Pakistan is a nuclear power, hundreds of millions of people, militarily capable in Central Asia, the gateway to Central Asia, with so many landlocked countries there as well. It's where the Indo-European world meets the Indo-Aryan world. It's where South Asia meets Eurasia. So Pakistan is a very important country. You have Turkey, the bridge between Europe and Asia historically, Istanbul. Not only that, but Turkey has been growing ever since the shrinking of Russia. Conversely, Russia grew as the Ottoman Empire shrunk. Russia, with this being bogged down in Ukraine and going through its difficulties, Turkey has capitalized on building alliances, trade agreements, security agreements throughout the region, and playing heavy roles in countries such as Somalia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia when Nagorno-Karabakh, Qatar, Libya. The list goes on and on and on. And then you have Saudi Arabia, and don't forget Turkey is a NATO member, so it's pretty much exempt from foreign force because the moment you attack Turkey, it would bring in the other NATO countries. And then you have Saudi Arabia, just a oil-rich country that has a lot of capital to move around, and they always historically been a major geopolitical player in the region through their finances. So that was one alliance. But a few days ago, the news is flooded with information that the UAE in India is on a verge of a security agreement themselves. I haven't seen the same language as the collective bargaining, but this is insane. There's been a lot of tension between Saudi Arabia and UAE. And I understand that the UAE was looking for a way out because you just saw that Saudi Arabia made a deal with Turkey and Pakistan. Now, granted, UAE probably already been in discussions with India, but for them to so quickly announce this to go to India, it really was hair trigger. They really wanted to solidify themselves, and all these security agreements is maintaining power for these administrations. This is their way of defending against each other. So, on one hand, like let's first talk about these alliances. I thought it was disappointing for India because I thought India was above this. You know, a lot of Indians constantly talk about their historical commitment to neutrality, for one. But this to me is beneath them. India is going to need both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to exercise its geopolitical goals. I much would have thought it'd be more wise for them to come in as power brokers as opposed to picking a side. And the thing with India and Pakistan, they can't stomach each other for some reason. There's plenty of reasons, but they can't move beyond that. And I always thought that would have been the signal of India's ascent. I'm a big believer that India is going to be more powerful than Russia. People talk about a world of United States, Russia, and China, but I think of a world with China, India, and the United States, like those being the great powers. And this to me is beneath India. To try to get into regional Middle Eastern conflicts, knowing that India is going to need oil and energy from both countries, all the countries in the Middle East, as they seek to nourish their growing population of 1.4 billion people, the largest on the planet. So I just found that to be unfortunate as well. It automatically puts them in contention. Like, I don't know if because they saw Pakistan on the other side, but imagine them being brought into a war on the South Asia, impacting their economy, dragging them down for the UAE. You're attaching the fate of 1.4 billion people to the UAE in their decisions. As I said, I haven't seen the same language, but this is the risk you take. A nuclear war with Pakistan because of a regional conflict between the United Arab Emirates and their neighbor Saudi Arabia. So I just thought that was really interesting. Modi was all smiles ear to ear, but I think India, unlike China, which you can't move, they're so stable, you can't get any emotion out of China. The world can burn down around them. The Chinese are not going to go against their doctrine at this point. They want stability no matter what goes on around them. They didn't move a finger when with Ukraine and Russia. They're not, you at least overtly, and they're not moving a finger. And they didn't move a finger when the United States overthrew Nicolas Maduro after Maduro made great deals with them around oil. And China's steady as she goes. And what China does is it picks its shots. Now you see that Carney became low-hanging fruit with his frustration with President Trump in America. And what did the Chinese do? They walked with him, rolled out the red carpet, made him feel like he was the king of Siam. And next thing you know, EBs, you have BYD EBs on their way to Vancouver. So, in invading the North American market. We'll see how that works out for all sides involved as well. So China really picks its shots, and when the opportunity presents itself, it capitalizes. India, I feel as though they're anxious to get in the mix right now, show what they can do, and I don't think this is the way to do it. But I also wanted to talk about some of the fundamentals that came in here. This already boils down to a lot of tension right now on the Arabian Peninsula between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Now, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS as he is colloquially called, he's been making a lot of moves trying to, I think, make Saudi Arabia a lot more than it is. Saudi Arabia is money bags rich. Is it a geopolitical power? I think not. Does it have the capacity to be a geopolitical power? I think not. But does it have aspiration to be a geopolitical power? Absolutely. And this is what happened where capacity and ambition aren't lined up. And MBS has been throwing a lot of weight around, investing a lot of money trying to diversify Saudi Arabia and make it to a very grand player in the MENA area. Now, him along, or Saudi Arabia and UAE have been doing a lot of things financially in the regions. There's very few countries that money haven't infiltrated, from Somalia to Morocco to Lebanon, all corners, and you can say Pakistan as well. But what seemed to be the sticking point, because these countries were aligned on a lot of issues previously, but what seems to be the sticking point is how their relationship is evolving in Yemen. And for the skinny, Yemen is a very, very weird or strange situation. It's not a lot of coverage on what's going there. People just know it's crazy things going on in Yemen. But basically, you have a situation where it's kind of rooted in it. You could say the Arab Spring, and the more I read about the Arab Spring, the more I think it was just a geopolitical operation by Russian enemies to remove Russian influence from the MENA area. So what happened is you had a leadership that was in Yemen for decades. So Yemen was kind of welded together between the north and the south. It's a predominantly Sunni country, but you had the southern portion of Aden, which was more of a British Dominion. And what happened was, even though it was a British Dominion, during the Cold War, it sided with the Soviets. Nevertheless, it was more industrial portion, more sparse, less people, but more industrial. And then you pair them with the North, a little bit more diverse. So this part of Arabia, they're not going to be rich in oil like the Gulf states. So you're going to have your Gulf states to the east, your Qatars, your UAEs, these Kuwaits. These guys are going to be filthy rich in oil. This part, these interior states, such as Yemen or Oman, they're going to be more rich in like minerals as opposed to natural energy, which means that these countries aren't relatively rich. They require a lot more, a different type of investment, a different type of economic structure. Now, the reason why Yemen is so important is because historically on the peninsula, Saudi Arabia has been big boss from a demographic and economic point of view. But Yemen has been experiencing a growth spurt, and they roughly have the same population now. And by 2050, Saudi Arabia's population is expected to be around 50 million people. Yemen's population is expected to be around 70 million people, which means that Yemen is going to be the largest population on the Arabian Peninsula. So this is why it's so important. These guys, they're growing fast. And this is an opportunity for Saudi Arabia or UAE to really gain influence. So what happened is there was a leader in Yemen that been ruling there for a while. It was President Ali Abdullah Saleh. And during the Arab Spring, like so many other countries, but there was chaos in Yemen. And he was convinced by the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, the Gulf nations to step down. And now his background is he's from the northern. So in the part of the north, there's the Shiite faction, the Zaidi Shiites. Now they're not the majority of the country. Yemen is majority Sunni, but it's a strong pocket, and this portion of the country also contributes a lot to the Houthi forces. So you have these Houthi forces in the north, but he's also come from a Shia background. Nevertheless, the Gulf countries convinced him to step down, and they gave leadership to his number two, Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi. Now, Hadi was less of a strong man in the country, and he really didn't have the health or the security infrastructure that Saleh had. Nevertheless, the Houthis kind of blew up in the north. They had always kind of been a nuisance out there, but they really blew up around this time and was able to take Sinai, which is the capital of the country. And this forced Hadi and the government forces, the PLC or the Presidential Leadership Council, it forced them kind of to take exile within the country. So they operate within pockets of the country. The Saudis tried to push the Houthis back, but were unsuccessful in doing so. The Houthis were able to sustain themselves. So they haven't technically taken over the whole country, but they have established themselves and with a stronghold within the northern and northwestern parts of the country. And this is in opposition to Saudi Arabia influence. Before this, Saudi Arabia was influential in Yemen. And they expect Saleh to step down. Like, I'm still investigating this, but I got a funny feeling it has to do with Saleh probably getting too close to the Russians. I can't prove it yet, but it's something that he did that really made the Saudis want to remove him and go with his number two, Hadi. Now, nevertheless, you have this Houthi factions that is kind of a nuisance and control the capital. And then once they took over, the country kind of fragmented. So you have the PLC forces, the government forces, and then you also have these STCO, Southern Transitional Council forces. Now these are the power brokers of the less populated, more industrial South. So when the country separated or fragmented, you'll have the Houthis in the north and northwest, government forces primarily more in the west, but in pockets, or excuse me, more in the east, but in pockets. And that's going to be your PLC. In the southern part of the country, you're going to have this former Soviet stronghold, this Aden area operated by the STC. And in the southwest, you got a little pocket for the nephew of the former leader, Ali Abdullah Saleh. His nephew, Tariq Saleh, operates out the southwest of the country. So the country is freaking fragmented, right? There's no real central authority inside the country. And what happened is Saudi Arabia and Yemen were both supporting the PLC against the Houthis, and the UAE pulled out, or they lessened their fervor. And the UAE really started to support more the STC in the south, as well as Tariq Saleh in the southwest. And while the Saudis are still supporting the PLC government, and then you have the Houthis out there. Now, who's really supporting the Houthis? They say it's the Iranians, but we all know Iranians are proxy for another power, right? Because when it was time to take down the Iranians, nobody wanted to take down the Iranians. A lot of these countries rely on a weak Iran. So although they may say overtly, oh, we don't like Iran, when you look at the observable outcomes, the government of Iran that represses and suppresses the people of Iran and keeps Iran from developing and becoming a competitive peer. These countries love Iran based on observable outcome. So you have this fragmentation, and I think it's because you only have 11 million people in UAE. UAE is really trying to establish itself as a sovereign power. And this is really angering the Saudi regime. Remember, the Saudi regime is very temperamental. These are the same people that dismembered Khashoggi and the embassy in Turkey. Like, these guys do not have patience. So they're frustrated, the Saudis, and I think that a lot of that was this alliance they built up with Turkey and Pakistan was to solidify themselves. But now you have this UAE and Saudi Arabia neighbors right next door on the Arabian Peninsula with this iron grip, where Saudi Arabia is grabbing one piece of Yemen, UAE is grabbing a piece of Yemen, and then you have militias and fragmentations of power brokers within inside of Yemen, such as the Houthis and Tariq Saleh, who are trying to gain their part of Yemen. And so the future of Yemen is going to determine the peace on the the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula. And also, let's not forget, this is a very important position along the Red Sea. So that Bandir, the straits from where you can go from the Indian Ocean up to Red Sea to the Mediterranean, vice versa, using the Suez Canal. So this is a very vital country, geopolitically, demographically, and geographically, that these two countries are escalating tensions for. But we hope, because now it's starting to spread between a local rivalry between these two to something beyond that. Now they're bringing in nuclear power such as Pakistan and India. And this could really escalate in a very bad way, because all of these countries have historically shown a hair trigger when it comes to conflict, and they have no problems launching buttons and launching planes. So we're going to keep looking. Love to hear your thoughts on this. If you have insight in the situation, please comment below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.